Sometimes, the most dangerous criminals are the ones you least expect. David Cross, a seemingly ordinary office boy working at one of the most prestigious banks in the world, had always been underestimated. At just 32 years old, he appeared to be no different than the countless others in his position, young, eager to learn, and quietly serving the daily needs of the bank's elite. However, his true identity was far from ordinary. Beneath the surface of this humble office worker lay a former secret agent, once presumed dead after a covert mission went terribly wrong. David had faked his death to escape his past and rebuild his life under a new name, all while secretly infiltrating the very bank that held the key to the world's largest diamond, the Eclipse diamond. His partner in this audacious plan was Mira, a brilliant hacker, 30 years old, who had once worked as a top-tier IT expert for Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency. Her expertise in infiltrating high-security systems had been invaluable, and together, they formed an unstoppable team. But this was no ordinary heist. This was the culmination of 2.5 years of meticulous planning, years spent with David undercover in the bank, learning every secret and exploiting every weakness in the bank's fortress-like security. David had always known that this diamond was the key to their future, but as he stood there, working as the office boy, there was a constant nagging thought in the back of his mind: what if it was all for nothing? What if the systems they had been working so hard to manipulate had already been breached? Time was running out. Two burning questions lingered in David's mind. How could he have been so blind to the rising dangers around him? Who was truly pulling the strings, and was Mira involved in the plan from the start? Do you want to uncover the truth behind the world's largest diamond heist? How did David pull off the perfect plan without anyone suspecting a thing? If you want to know all the shocking details and how the bank's security ultimately failed, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell icon for more updates. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the blinds, David's mind was racing. He had already spent months inside the bank, laying the groundwork for the heist. Every move was calculated, every decision precise. David was playing the long game, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Myra's instructions were clear: everything had to go according to plan, or everything would fall apart. The next few days were critical. They were about to make their move, and David had to maintain the perfect disguise. His cover as the office boy was flawless, and no one suspected a thing. But as he walked through the marble halls of the bank, David could not shake the feeling that someone was watching him, waiting for him to slip up. He could not afford to make a single mistake. With everything in place, David had one final task before the heist, the most dangerous part of the plan. He had to get close to the vault, the very vault that held the Eclipse diamond. Every piece of this puzzle depended on his ability to bypass the security systems and gain access to the treasure that would change his life forever. The clock was ticking, and David was ready for the final act. But the question remained: could he trust Mira completely? Or was there something she had not told him? What if the key to the perfect heist is not just the plan, but the people you can trust? The next few days felt like an eternity. David's heart raced with each passing moment, every second ticking closer to the heist that would either make or break him. Myra's message still echoed in his mind: be ready. Everything is in place. It is now or never. They had rehearsed this moment for years, but as the time neared, the pressure of the entire operation began to sink in. He was not just playing a game anymore, this was his life on the line. As the sun set over the city, casting long shadows through the marble pillars of the bank, David stood still in the break room, pretending to be just another office boy. He kept his eyes focused on the clock as it ticked toward the final hour. His role in the bank, the seemingly insignificant tasks he performed every day, these were all part of the mask he wore. But under the surface, David was a man on a mission, someone with a past he could never escape, a past that would either catch up to him tonight or lead him to freedom. Mira had warned him about the risks. She had reminded him time and time again that this heist was not just about stealing the Eclipse diamond. No, it was about making sure that they, as ghosts, would never be found. David's days working at the bank were coming to an end, but the consequences of his actions would follow him for the rest of his life. As the night fell, David could not shake the feeling that something was off. He was just a few steps away from the vault, the one place that could change everything for him. But the security systems, the elite personnel guarding the vault, it all seemed too easy. The very thing he had been preparing for, this perfect plan, seemed too simple. It was all going too smoothly. He knew better than to believe in luck. Suddenly, as David stood near the elevator, his phone buzzed. It was Mira. Her message was short, yet it carried a weight he had not expected. "We have a problem." David's stomach sank as he looked over his shoulder, scanning the room. He was supposed to meet with Myra's team inside the vault area, but something had changed. Something was not right. He tried to remain calm, responding with a text, "What happened?" Her reply came in seconds, "The syndicate is on to us. Someone inside the bank is working for them. They know about the diamond." David froze. The Diamond Syndicate, the one criminal organization he had tried to avoid. They were just as deadly as they were elusive. How had they found out? His plan, carefully crafted for years, had been built on secrecy, and now it was threatened by a mole, someone within the bank who was working with the very people he had been hiding from. The clock was ticking down to the heist, and David had to act quickly. He could not afford to let the syndicate get in his way. The plan was already in motion. Mira had already begun hacking into the security systems to disable alarms and surveillance. There was no turning back now. As he made his way toward the vault, David passed by a familiar face, Greg, the bank manager. Greg had always been the one David had gotten close to, someone he had befriended over the past 2 years. But tonight, his smile was a little too wide, his gaze a little too calculating. David felt a chill run down his spine. He knew something was wrong, but he could not afford to hesitate. If Greg was involved, then he was the one responsible for tipping off the syndicate. David's mind raced, but his body moved on instinct. He had no time to waste. As he walked towards the vault, the silence in the hallway felt deafening. Inside, Myra's voice came through his earpiece, "David, they have already started locking down the security grid. You need to move faster." David responded quietly, "I am almost there." As he approached the vault door, the tension was unbearable. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the keycard that would override the security system. Just as he was about to slide it into the lock, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, David saw Greg standing there, a sly grin on his face. "You thought you could get away with this, did not you?" Greg's voice was cold, his hands stuffed into his pockets. David's heart raced. He had never seen Greg like this before. This was not just an office colleague anymore. This was someone who had been playing a part in a much bigger game. Greg stepped forward, a gun now in his hand. "The syndicate is watching. And so am I." David's mind spun. This was it, the moment he had feared. He was trapped. Would David be able to escape this final trap, or was this the end of his carefully crafted plan? What had gone wrong, and who else was involved in the web of deception? David stood frozen, the cold metal of the gun glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on his chest as Greg's smug grin never wavered. Every plan, every moment of the past 2.5 years seemed to hang in the balance, teetering on the edge of failure. The syndicate knew. They knew everything. David had underestimated their reach, but now he was facing the consequences. "You did not think you were the only one playing this game, did you, David?" Greg's voice was icy, his words cutting through the tension in the air. "The syndicate has eyes everywhere. And you are not as clever as you think you are." David's mind raced. He was trapped. The vault stood behind him, the diamond mere feet away, yet within reach, it seemed more like a distant dream. The only thing standing between him and freedom was the man with the gun, and the knowledge that everything he had worked for might be slipping away. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. David glanced over his shoulder, his heart pounding. The syndicate was close. They were closing in. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the steady click of Greg's boots on the marble floor. Greg stepped closer, and David's hand instinctively went to the small, concealed gun tucked beneath his jacket. He knew this moment would come. He just had not expected it to be like this. "You think you can still walk away with that diamond?" Greg continued, his smile never faltering. "You think after everything you have done, you can just walk out the door and disappear?" David's eyes flicked from the vault to Greg. His fingers tightened around the grip of his gun, his mind calculating the next move. He was not going down without a fight. Not now. Not after everything he had sacrificed. "Greg," David said, his voice low and measured, "you have made a big mistake. I am not the one you should be worried about." Greg raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about?" The sound of the approaching footsteps grew louder. David's pulse quickened. He knew the game had changed. Mira had been their lifeline, but now her role was even more critical. She was waiting for him, ready to override the security systems and ensure their escape. But something felt off. A split second of hesitation was all it took. David lunged toward the vault door, his hand reaching for the override code he had memorized. Greg lunged after him, but not before David managed to slam his shoulder into the vault, knocking it open just enough to give him a few precious seconds. The moment the vault door opened, David's breath caught in his throat. There it was, the eclipsed diamond, sitting under layers of security glass, surrounded by millions of dollars in precious gems and artifacts. The heist was on the verge of success, but the stakes had never been higher. With Greg closing in and the syndicate likely just moments away, this was David's only chance to seize the diamond and make his escape. But the countdown had begun. "Get down." Myra's voice came through the earpiece, sharp and urgent. "They have activated the lockdown protocol. You have less than 5 minutes before the security locks are re-engaged. You need to move now." David's eyes flicked to Greg, who had raised his weapon, aiming it directly at him. This was it. The moment when everything would either succeed or fall apart. Without another word, David ducked behind the vault's heavy security glass, pulling the diamond free from its casing. As he gripped it in his hands, the world seemed to slow down. The weight of the diamond felt both heavy and impossibly light at the same time, a symbol of his entire life's work. But the next few seconds would decide everything. Just as David turned to make his escape, the lights flickered, and the room descended into chaos. Sirens blared, alarms ringing in his ears. Myra's voice was frantic. "They know, David. They have overridden the security breach. You have no time left. Get out, now." Greg charged forward, gun raised. David's heart raced, but his instincts took over. In one fluid motion, he ducked, rolled, and fired his weapon at the lock on the vault door, disabling it just enough to break through. Greg shouted something, but David did not hear it. He was already running, the diamond clutched tightly in his hand. The plan was crumbling, but there was still a chance. He could still make it. The syndicate and the bank's security were closing in, but with the right moves, he might just slip through their fingers. But as David ran toward the exit, he saw something that froze him in his tracks. Mira, the woman he had trusted, his partner in this operation, was standing in the doorway. And she was not alone. There were more figures behind her, their faces obscured in the shadows. David's chest tightened. Had Mira been playing him all along? Or had she been forced into this as well? The most important question now loomed larger than ever. Could he still trust her? Or had the biggest twist in this heist just been revealed? In a game where trust is the most valuable currency, what happens when the only person you rely on is the one you cannot trust? David stood motionless in the doorway, his heart racing. Mira, his partner, the one person he thought he could rely on, was now standing in front of him, but something was different. Behind her, a group of armed men moved forward, and the realization hit him like a cold wave. This was not the syndicate. This was something else. And it was all happening too quickly for him to process. Mira had always been the brains of their operation, the one who kept everything under control from behind the scenes. But now, as she stepped aside to reveal the group behind her, David felt a cold chill run down his spine. The man at the front, tall and expressionless, locked eyes with him. His gaze was cold, calculating. "You think you are in control, do not you?" The man said, his voice calm, almost too calm. "You have been playing a dangerous game, David." David's mind raced. He was trapped. The diamond, the heist, everything was slipping away in a matter of seconds. Mira, the one person who had always been by his side, was now part of something he did not understand. This was not just a robbery anymore. It was a setup, and he was right in the middle of it. "What do you want from me?" David asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his mind was anything but calm. The man took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "We want the diamond, of course. But more than that, we want you to do your part. You think you have been planning this heist alone? You have been feeding right into our hands." David blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. "What are you talking about?" His voice grew more intense, desperate. "Mira, what is going on here?" Mira did not speak right away. She just stood there, her eyes avoiding his. The silence between them was deafening. David could feel the weight of her betrayal pressing down on him. This was the moment he had feared, the moment the truth came crashing down. "I never wanted any of this," Mira finally whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I never wanted to bring you into this. But I had no choice." David's breath caught in his throat. "No choice? You have been working with them this entire time?" Mira nodded, her expression filled with regret. "They were always watching, David. I thought I could outsmart them, but they had me from the start. I was already in too deep." The man in the dark suit stepped forward again, his presence dominating the room. "You have been a pawn in our game, David. All this time, you have been playing by our rules, but now it is time to end this." David's heart pounded in his chest as everything around him spun. The man's words echoed in his ears. A pawn in their game? Was this all some twisted setup from the beginning? Had Mira really been part of this conspiracy all along? Or had she been forced into it? "The diamond is just the beginning," the man continued, his voice colder than before. "You were never meant to take it. We want more. The power. The leverage. You have helped us get closer to our ultimate goal. And now, it is time for you to play your final role." David felt a surge of anger, a flood of questions flooding his mind. His entire life, everything he had worked for, was now on the verge of collapse. He looked at Mira, the woman he had trusted, the woman who had always been his partner. Her face was filled with pain and fear. "Mira, you have to tell me the truth," David said, his voice shaking with frustration. "Were you ever on my side? Or was this all a lie?" Mira's eyes welled with tears, but she did not answer. The truth was clear in her silence. The betrayal stung deeper than anything David had ever felt. "Do you think we are just going to let you walk away with the diamond?" The man asked, his voice sharp and mocking. "You have no choice anymore, David. You are part of the plan now. And you are not going anywhere." David's mind was racing. The diamond. The heist. His future, it was all slipping away faster than he could grasp. The walls were closing in, and he was running out of time. Mira, her face pale, turned to him. "David, we cannot outrun this. You know that. We have to play by their rules now." David's world was spinning. He had no choice but to make a decision, and it had to be now. Trust Mira? Fight back? Or hand over the diamond and walk away, knowing that everything he had done had been manipulated from the very start? As the group closed in, David realized something. He had underestimated everything: Mira, the syndicate, the plan. He had played the game without realizing that the true enemy had always been closer than he thought. If you are still following this gripping heist story, do not forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel. Every move you make can lead you closer to the prize or closer to your end. David's heart hammered in his chest as he stood frozen in the dimly lit hallway, the weight of the diamond heavy in his hands. He had come so close. Every single detail of the plan had been meticulously laid out over the past 2.5 years. Yet now, in this moment, as he faced Myra's betrayal and the armed men closing in, everything he had worked for seemed to unravel in an instant. The air between them was thick with tension. Mira had always been the one person David trusted without question, but now she stood before him, her face pale, her eyes avoiding his gaze. It was clear, this was not just a heist anymore. This was survival. And he had no idea who the real enemy was. "We need to move, David," Mira whispered, her voice breaking through his thoughts. "There is no turning back now. They are going to kill us both if we do not act." David could not look at her. Not now. He had trusted her with everything, and now she was part of the very thing he was trying to escape. He turned his attention back to the man who had spoken earlier, the leader of the group that had been lying in wait. "You think you can still escape this, David?" The man's voice was cold, calculating. "You have been playing the game for too long. But now, you are just a piece we no longer need." David's grip tightened around the diamond. It was not just about the jewel anymore. It was about control. And if he did not take it back, if he did not take control of this situation, it was over. Mira had been right about one thing: there was no turning back. He looked at Mira one last time, her expression a mixture of regret and fear. "Is this it, then? You have been playing both sides all along." Her eyes welled with tears, but she did not answer. David could feel the weight of her silence pressing down on him. He had to move. There was no time left. The man in the dark suit stepped forward, his presence intimidating. "We have been watching you, David. Every move. Every step. You think you have been the one controlling this game, but it was never yours to control." David felt a cold chill creep up his spine. He was just a pawn. They had been using him from the start, leading him to the very moment where he was now. It was clear. The syndicate had orchestrated everything. The plan, the setup, the betrayal, everything. David swallowed hard. He was trapped, and the only way out was to think fast. There was one thing he knew for certain: he was not going down without a fight. He turned to Mira. "You have been feeding them information, have not you?" Mira nodded, her face etched with regret. "I did not have a choice, David. They have been tracking us from the moment we started. The moment you decided to steal the diamond, it was all part of their plan." David's mind raced. He was in too deep. Mira had been caught up in something far bigger than he had ever imagined. But this was still his fight. He could not let her actions seal both their fates. As the armed men advanced, David had only moments to make a decision. The diamond was still within his reach, but it was more than just a physical object now. It was the key to everything. Freedom. Power. Revenge. "Get down." Myra's voice came through his earpiece, frantic. "The lockdown protocol is starting. You have less than 5 minutes before the entire bank is sealed off." David glanced toward the exit, the countdown in his mind ticking faster. He could not afford to hesitate. As much as the diamond was important, getting out of this mess alive mattered more. With one final look at Mira, David bolted toward the exit, the armed men hot on his heels. He was not going down like this. He was not going to let the syndicate win. Not when he was so close. But just as he reached the hallway leading to the exit, a familiar figure stepped in front of him, blocking his path. David's heart sank as he recognized the face. It was Greg, the bank manager, the one person David had trusted, the one person he had thought was on his side. Greg's gun was aimed directly at David. "You think you can escape with the diamond, David?" he sneered. "You were always too blind to see it. You were never in control." "Not really." David's mind spun. Greg, the man who had given him a chance, who had been his ally, was now standing in his way. Had Greg been working with the syndicate all along? Or had he been forced into this game as well? David's eyes locked onto Greg's. He could feel the weight of the situation crushing him. What now? The greatest heists never go smoothly. But escaping the system takes more than skill. David stood frozen, his eyes locked on Greg. The man who had been a mentor of sorts to him, the one who had welcomed him into the inner circle of the bank, was now standing in front of him with a gun. Every plan he had, every calculated move he had made over the past 2.5 years, felt like it was crumbling in an instant. Greg's voice was cold, filled with a mix of superiority and finality. "You never saw it coming, did you, David? You were always so focused on the diamond, you did not even notice the bigger picture." David's fingers tightened around the diamond, his knuckles turning white. He was cornered. He had been cornered from the moment he had stepped into the bank, but now, it was different. His entire existence was at stake. He could feel the weight of the gun aimed at him, but he did not flinch. The one thing he had left was his will to survive. "You were part of this," David said, his voice steady, even though his heart was pounding. "All along. Were you ever on my side, Greg?" Greg's lips curled into a smile, one that held no warmth, only the bitter edge of betrayal. "I was never on your side, David. I was always working for them. The syndicate. You thought you were playing them, but they were playing you from the start." David blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. "What are you talking about?" His voice grew more intense, desperate. "Mira, what is going on here?" Mira did not speak right away. She just stood there, her eyes avoiding his. The silence between them was deafening. David could feel the weight of her betrayal pressing down on him. This was the moment he had feared, the moment the truth came crashing down. "I never wanted any of this," Mira finally whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I never wanted to bring you into this. But I had no choice." David's breath caught in his throat. "No choice? You have been working with them this entire time?" Mira nodded, her expression filled with regret. "They were always watching, David. I thought I could outsmart them, but they had me from the start. I was already in too deep." The man in the dark suit stepped forward again, his presence dominating the room. "You have been a pawn in our game, David. All this time, you have been playing by our rules, but now it is time to end this." David's heart pounded in his chest as everything around him spun. The man's words echoed in his ears. A pawn in their game? Was this all some twisted setup from the beginning? Had Mira really been part of this conspiracy all along? Or had she been forced into it? "The diamond is just the beginning," the man continued, his voice colder than before. "You were never meant to take it. We want more. The power. The leverage. You have helped us get closer to our ultimate goal. And now, it is time for you to play your final role." David felt a surge of anger, a flood of questions flooding his mind. His entire life, everything he had worked for, was now on the verge of collapse. He looked at Mira, the woman he had trusted, the woman who had always been his partner. Her face was filled with pain and fear. "Mira, you have to tell me the truth," David said, his voice shaking with frustration. "Were you ever on my side? Or was this all a lie?" Myra's eyes welled with tears, but she did not answer. The truth was clear in her silence. The betrayal stung deeper than anything David had ever felt. "Do you think we are just going to let you walk away with the diamond?" the man asked, his voice sharp and mocking. "You have no choice anymore, David. You are part of the plan now. And you are not going anywhere. David's mind was racing. The diamond. The heist. His future, it was all slipping away faster than he could grasp. The walls were closing in, and he was running out of time. Mira, her face pale, turned to him. David, we cannot outrun this. You know that. We have to play by their rules now. David's world was spinning. He had no choice but to make a decision, and it had to be now. Trust Mira. Fight back. Or hand over the diamond and walk away, knowing that everything he had done had been manipulated from the very start. As the group closed in, David realized something. He had underestimated everything: Mira, the syndicate, the plan. He had played the game without realizing that the true enemy had always been closer than he thought. David's mind was spinning as he locked eyes with Greg. The man who had been a source of information, a colleague he thought he could trust, was now standing before him with a gun in hand. The weight of the diamond in his pocket felt like an anchor pulling him down. His heart hammered in his chest, but his body did not flinch. The years of preparation, the lies, and the betrayal had brought him to this moment. He was not going down without a fight. You have been played, David, Greg said, his voice cold and unforgiving. All of this, every move you made, it was for nothing. David's grip tightened around the diamond, but he did not answer. He was too focused. Myra's earlier betrayal was a heavy blow, but he could not afford to let emotions cloud his judgment now. The only way out was to keep moving, to fight back. Mira stood behind Greg, silent, her face a mixture of regret and fear. She had been part of this, but David knew now that whatever her reasons, it did not matter. This was not just about the diamond. This was about control, and who held it. David knew he could not outrun them. The syndicate had men posted all around the building, and Greg was just one part of a much larger force. There was no easy way out. But David had a plan. He had set it up weeks ago, expecting the worst. Without warning, David lunged for the nearest security panel, his hand slamming against it to activate a hidden feature. The room flooded with the sharp screech of an emergency alarm, the lights flickering as the system went into lockdown mode. Greg's face twisted in frustration as the doors slammed shut. You are not escaping, Greg growled, but David did not wait for him to react. He grabbed Myra's arm, pulling her toward the hallway leading to the underground tunnels they had prepared as a last resort. Time was running out. He knew the perimeter had already been compromised, but the tunnel was their only way out now. Mira, get moving, David commanded. His voice was sharp, but his mind was already 1,000 steps ahead, calculating their next move. Myra's hesitation was brief. She nodded, following David as they moved through the corridors. But the noise of footsteps behind them quickened, and they both knew that they had mere minutes before the syndicate would be on them. The tunnel entrance loomed ahead, hidden behind a metal grate. David ripped it open, the clanking of metal loud in the silent hallway. Myra's eyes were wide, but there was no time for questions. They were on borrowed time. They dove into the dark tunnel, their feet pounding against the damp earth beneath them. David did not look back. He could not afford to. His only focus was the exit that lay ahead, the sliver of hope that they might actually make it out. As they sprinted through the maze-like tunnels, David's mind raced. He had always been one step ahead, but now, he was losing ground. The diamond, the one thing that had started it all, felt heavier with each step. Every decision they made now would determine their fate. They emerged from the tunnel into the abandoned streets just outside the bank, the cool night air hitting their faces. The city was quiet, too quiet. David could hear the distant sound of sirens, but he did not stop. He pulled Mira along, the urgency in his steps matching the pounding of his heart. Suddenly, a car screeched to a halt in front of them, blocking their escape route. David froze, his instincts kicking in, but the car door opened, and to his shock, it was Greg, standing with a gun still in hand, eyes locked on him. But this time, there was something different in his gaze. There was no anger, just cold calculation. "You are not going anywhere, David," Greg said, his voice steady, like this was all part of the plan. "Not without giving us what we want." David's eyes darted to Mira. Her expression was unreadable, but he could see the weight of her decision in her eyes. She had made her choice. But David was not ready to give up. Not yet. He had come too far to let it all end here. His hand moved instinctively to the side of his jacket, where he had hidden one last tool, a small device, designed to cause a temporary EMP burst that would disable any nearby electronics. "Move!" David yelled, as he pressed the button. There was a sudden flash of light, and everything around them went dark. The car's engine sputtered and died, and Greg's gun clicked uselessly in the air. The streets were eerily quiet. The brief moment of panic was enough for David to grab Myra's arm and pull her towards the shadows, where they could disappear into the night. But David knew better than to think they were safe. He had to keep moving. Every moment counted. As they ran, David's mind was fixed on one thing, the next step. They had made it this far, but the hardest part was yet to come. The syndicate would not stop. They would hunt David and Mira until the end of their lives. But for now, at least they were free. At least they had a chance. When the heist is over, the real game begins. David did not look back. He could not. As the cool night air hit his face, he felt the weight of the diamond in his pocket. It had been the symbol of everything they had worked for, a beacon of the life they were trying to escape. But now, with the sound of police sirens echoing in the distance, it did not feel like the prize it once was. He had made it out, but at what cost? Mira, his once trusted partner, had walked with him through every step of this chaos. But trust had been shattered. He could still see her face, the regret, the fear, but he could not focus on that. Not now. Not when the walls were closing in on them. The escape had been barely more than a blur, dodging the syndicate's men, avoiding the police, and now, hiding in an old warehouse by the docks. The empty space felt cold, just like David's mind. He had not allowed himself to think, to reflect on the truth of what had happened, not yet. There had been no time. He had to act. There was no room for doubt now. But as the adrenaline ebbed away, so did the certainty. Mira leaned against a crate, her face pale, eyes averted. "David," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "What now?" David's gaze dropped to the diamond. He had come so close to everything he had ever wanted, freedom, a life without looking over his shoulder. But now, even the diamond felt like an anchor. It was not about wealth anymore. It was about survival. And survival, he realized, meant making choices. Tough ones. He took a deep breath and spoke with a calmness that surprised even him. "This is not over. We do not get to walk away from this. Not yet." Myra's eyes flicked to him, a mixture of exhaustion and confusion in them. "What are you talking about?" David stepped closer, his fingers tapping the side of his jacket, the place where the diamond was carefully hidden. "This was never just about the heist, Mira. The syndicate, the diamond, the whole game, it was always bigger than just us. We have been players in something much darker. And I am done playing their game." Mira stayed silent for a moment, processing his words. Her eyes narrowed, and she pushed herself off the crate, standing straight. "What do you mean, done? You cannot just walk away from this. You cannot just take the diamond and disappear. They will come after us, David. The syndicate will not let us go." David met her gaze, a steely resolve behind his eyes. "I am not running, Mira. We need to take them down. Expose them for what they really are. We have made it this far. We cannot let them win." Myra's breath hitched, and David saw the faintest trace of fear in her eyes. He knew this was what she feared most, being caught up in something that had no clear end, no way out. The truth was, neither of them knew what the future held. But what David did know was that they could not just disappear. Not after all this. He walked over to a makeshift desk in the corner, grabbing a stack of papers they had used in their heist preparation. His hands were steady, his mind clear. We will need to lay low for a while. Gather information. We need to hit the syndicate where it hurts. And for that, we need everything they have been hiding. Mira sighed, the weight of the decision hanging heavily in the air. She finally nodded. All right. But we do this my way. We take them down, but we do it clean. We do not get sloppy. David smiled, a rare expression on his face. Agreed. As the night wore on, they set their plan into motion. The diamond was still in David's pocket, but it had become nothing more than a piece in a much larger puzzle. They had crossed the point of no return. The syndicate had already marked them, but now, David would make sure they would not walk away unscathed. As the first light of dawn crept through the cracked windows of the warehouse, David knew this was only the beginning. The world believed they had stolen the diamond and disappeared into the night. But the truth? The truth was far more complicated. The syndicate would come after them, of that David was sure. But he was done running. This time, he was not just a pawn in the game, he was playing it on his own terms. If you found this heist thrilling and are curious about what is next for David, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on future episodes. Want to hear more about David's daring adventures and other heists? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And do not forget to help us reach 1,000 likes so we can keep bringing you more intense and gripping stories.